Oh, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I am good.
Very good. And you are Vince Meldrum,
I am, and you're
uh,
Dennis.
right? Dennis Paula with GlobalConscience.World. Um,
Excellent.
when I interview somebody, I always look at their website and see what's going on and any other information I can find. And what you are doing is fantastic.
Well,
I
thank you.
we
That's nice.
I know that I'd like I'm hoping they'll just sort of explain it so people will understand it. The website is incredibly well organized, and which is
Thanks.
not common. But the other part that struck me from a lot of this is that civics as a subject has been pulled out of most schools, and
Yeah.
you're bringing it back within an environmental education program.
Yeah, we're kind of sliding it back in science classes, strangely enough. But it's not traditional civics as you would think about it. It is civic experience, right? It's so doing civics as compared to learning about civics, about the structure of government.
Except you have to learn how it works in order to do something.
You do. You learn kind of as you go, though. It's
Yeah,
not, you don't sit in a lecture about the branches of government. You get out and work through the branches of government, as it were.
right. So, how long have you been doing this?
Well, Earth Force has been around since 1994. I first was hired by Earth Force in 1999, but I left in 2007 and then came back in 2016, I think, or 2015. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I'm not sure. I've been back for a while. So
Okay, and you have a fairly large staff, from what I can tell, compared to some other nonprofits that are worrying about environmental issues.
yeah, there are nine of us. We're also a virtual organization, Dennis, which means that there are nine of us, but we live in seven different states, and everybody works at home, and has for quite a while now.
Oh, okay. Um, the one part I was trying, well, could you just sort of explain a little bit for someone that doesn't really know what you're doing, what you're actually doing?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm actually going to explain. I'm going to tell you a quick story, really, first, because I think that does a good job of explaining what we do, and then I'll walk you through how we actually do it. And so a couple of years ago, some kids here in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm based in Arlington, Virginia. They found mold in their classrooms, and the mold was pretty bad. I mean, it was mushrooms growing up underneath the baseboards of the school, that kind of thing. And so they wanted to try and solve that problem. And they started to do some research around it. They found, that the mold was actually quite toxic. It was black mold, and they found 13 different variations. Seven of those were potentially toxic. And so as a part of that study, they went from that to trying to understand what policies and practices at the school system govern mold in schools. What kind of remediation do you have to do? What kind of notice is required? So on and so forth. And they found actually that their school system didn't require either remediation nor notification of people that were in the buildings. And they were kind of shocked by that. And so they went to the school board and the PTA and they said, we found this mold. This is really bad. And the mold actually had come from climate change. And the reason that climate change had caused the mold is because we get a lot more rain than we used to. So the buildings weren't designed to manage this rain. We have a lot higher humidity than we used to, and the buildings weren't designed to manage that humidity. It was made out of soft wood, and the soft wood had gotten wet and it had gotten moldy. And so as they were going through and talking to the PTA and the school board and such, they really didn't get the kind of solutions that they wanted. The school system came in and they painted over the moldy section of the classroom. They talked to the kids about moving them to another room or putting in filters, and the kids were pretty adamant that three things should happen. That the parents of the kids should be notified anytime there's mold in the school, that the teachers and adults in the building should be notified, and that the remediation that happens should be at the highest quality, right? It should be something that makes the environment safe. So as I said, they didn't get a lot of traction with the school system. They went to the mayor of their city and said, this is what we'd like to have happen. And the mayor said, yeah, I totally agree with you, but I don't have any money for that. So I can't do that. And along through all of this, they met a state senator named Eben, Senator Eben, who represents their area. And they started to do some research and talk to Senator Eben. And through that process, they found that Virginia was one of 12 states that didn't have a law around mold remediation and notification out of all 50 states in the United States. And so they worked with Senator Eben to craft an indoor air quality law that the state would then require school systems to test for mold on a regular basis, to provide notification to parents and teachers, and then to do remediation when mold was identified. So they worked together with him to create that. And then they visited the session of the Virginia House of Delegates. They made presentations to a number of subcommittees. They went door to door with delegates and senators to talk to them about what they would like to see the law be. And then the day came when the law was debated in the subcommittee. It got out of the subcommittee with all votes. And then they were introduced to the full House of Delegates and Senate. Got a second to say what they were talking about, and it passed the Virginia House of Delegates and the Senate. And then about 4 months later, the governor of Virginia signed that into law, and the law went into effect about 4 months ago now, somewhere along those lines. And so what that indicates, I think, is what EarthForce does. So we have developed a process where young people go through and identify using scientific techniques. They identify environmental problems that are interesting to them. And then they choose among all the environmental problems they find, which one that they want to work on. They do some research and try to understand the root causes and what brought this into being. And then from there, they develop a plan to take action, and they take action. And not all kids get to change state laws. That doesn't happen everywhere that we do it, unfortunately. But kids do change a lot of city policies. They change a lot of school policies. And the way that we deliver this is we train middle school educators that are primarily science teachers who use this process as part of a scientific investigation. And then they use it across the classroom. I think last year we worked with somewhere around 600 educators across the country. And that got us to about between 15 and 16,000 kids.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
I'm very impressed with people who can actually organize things on a functional basis and then get real results. How old were the kids involved with the mold issue?
They were 13. When they took it on. Pretty amazing group of kids, but I will say there was nothing special about them when they took it on. And I'm in contact with those kids all the time because they're just a special group of kids. But they were the kids in class who, one of them, his name is Ben. He was the kid that was always, cracking jokes and making challenges in class. And another one is a young girl named Bridget. And she was a girl who, when I first met her, she was so shy that she had grown her hair and combed it over her face, so you couldn't hardly see her whatsoever. And now you talk to them and they're like, wow, it's hard to believe we were those kids, and it's hard to imagine the changes that we've brought all these years later. And so it's a pretty transformative process for young people. And I think, the other thing, we talk a lot about the young people, but these kids that we work with are making real conservation and climate resilience progress in the communities where they live.
Well, yeah, you actually are changing them for life. I think that's really something. When you say you train educators, how does that work?
Well, there are two ways. First, EarthForce does direct training with educators, mostly here in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and in Colorado, we work with educators. And so I have staff who are professionals at providing professional development to educators. The way it works is it's a 3-day process in the summer where teachers attend. And then it's a 9-month process where we're talking to them, popping in and out of classrooms, helping them go through the hardest parts, right? Because we ask teachers to do some pretty funky things when you think about it. I mean, we want kids to decide what topics they're going to study more deeply. We want kids to decide how they're going to address these problems. It takes a real kind of change in mindset from I'm your lecturer to I'm a partner in crime with you kind of thing. So we help teachers get through that. So that's the first way that it happens. The second way is, and you probably saw this on our website. The second way is that we understand that as an individual nonprofit, we can never get big enough to change everything in the United States. And so a couple of years ago, we started working with other nonprofits to get them to incorporate what we call environmental action civics, this idea that kids can identify environmental problems and take real action to solve them, but to incorporate it in their programming as well. And I'm pretty excited to say now there are 40 organizations around the country that are integrating this. Our goal is to get to 300 by 5 years from now, so 2026, and to go from 15,000 kids a year to 150,000 kids a year. So we have a lot of work in front of us to get there.
You're in like, I think it's like 15 states now.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's 15 states, and we're rolling out a new partnership with Chipotle in a couple weeks that is going to be our first foray into a national kind of program. And so in theory, we'll be in all 50 states with that. With the Chipotle partnership, the young people aren't asking Chipotle to make a change necessarily. Chipotle has this goal around sustainable agriculture. And what we're asking young people to do is to take up that idea of sustainable agriculture in their community, whether it's urban or rural or suburban, wherever it is, identify what keeps sustainable agriculture from happening in their community, and then take steps to try and solve that. And so it's our first time, and I can't say this is what the kids are going to do because we don't know what the kids are going to do yet. But we're excited about the potential around like ways that communities and farms use water, for instance, and recycle water, or the way that communities restrict access to land, in rural and urban environments and stuff like that. And so they won't be necessarily working to change Chipotle, but they will be working with whoever kind of governs and does farming in the communities that they work in. And as you know, Dennis, I'm sure you know that the urban farming movement is just getting huge, right? It's everywhere across the country, and people are trying to both purchase more local, but also grow more of their own food. And so there's just ample opportunity for young people to try and figure that out.
Right. Okay. Again, it's sort of, I guess I like what they're doing, and I don't know. I like that a corporation is helping. I guess that's part of what it is. And
the cool part about Chipotle is they're really, really, really excited about this idea of kids getting involved at a systemic level rather than a personal choice level, right? And individual choice. So much of environmental education is teaching kids, to decrease their carbon footprint by riding their bicycle or turning off lights when they leave rooms, that kind of thing. But so much of the environmental challenges that we face require us to come together in some kind of format and address it as a group, right? Rather than changing our individual behavior. And I would add, I have unfortunately very little faith at a national or a federal level that we'll be able to address any of these things. And I think that we're going to be much better off working in our communities, where we live and work, and talking to them about everything from how do we decrease carbon to how do we increase resilience. Climate change is not something that is a faraway impact. It's something we're seeing every day now, right? It's happening all the time around us, and we need to adapt to it.
Yeah, that's part of what we are, or I suppose I'm pushing it. Scientists spent years putting models together, gathering data, and making predictions about what bad things were going to happen and when. And now we're there before the dates that they predicted. The predictions seem less important than the actions in terms of what we're doing right now.
I totally agree with you on the scientist thing. And I think that the question around climate change is, if you don't believe climate change now, it's not because it's not because of the science. There's nothing science I can do to change your mind. And it's now become a civic problem. I think that for us at Earth Force, we're trying to build is this sense of civic efficacy and action. So we want young people not just to show up at rallies, around predetermined issues. We want young people who are sitting down across the table from their city council members or whoever, and talking about things like resilience and adaptation and all of that on a regular basis. And I think we believe that you get that by making that the tool they have for change. So you asked me a little while ago about how old the kids that did the mold project were, and I said they're 13. And that's actually our sweet spot. Is between 10 and 14, is right in that age. And the reason that is true is because young people are at a developmental stage then when they're starting to understand their own locus of control, what impact they can have on the world. And they're trying to explore that and develop the tools that they will have to make change in the future. And if the tools that we give them are only participating in rallies created and developed by others, then that's the tool they have in the future. And we want young people to have that tool, but we also want them to have this tool of being able to identify problems and work with people in their community to try and solve them. We want them to have both tools.
Yeah, there's also the old argument or idea that all politics is local. Anyway,
Yeah.
So in a sense, whatever you're doing locally is it is affecting the national framework that we live within. So I
right again, now I would say all functional politics is local. So sorry, that's a little cynicism from me.
It's become dysfunctional. I think even the local is getting. I'm in Wisconsin.
Yeah, even the local is getting challenging.
Yeah, well, in Wisconsin, it's very dysfunctional. So it's a tough time. So I'm kind of curious, do parents ever contact you, or is it educators? I mean, if I had kids in school right now, I would call you, right? Because I would be interested in seeing if we could help put a program together in the school of my children. But does it come that way?
Yeah, it's both actually. Parents, teachers, right now, a lot of nonprofits that do education, environmental education in particular, but also people that are interested in civics and humanities. We get requests from a lot of places. And to be honest, for years, we just said, no, we don't work where you are. And the last few years, we've decided, yes. And so we actually, I don't know if you had a chance when you were going through the websites, we created a separate website called Earth Force Resources. Yeah. And we've taken 95% of everything we do, and we just give it away for free in there, right? Anybody can get in and access it, any teacher, any nonprofit, anybody that wants to. The 5% that we hold back is stuff that we're not quite sure about yet. You know what I mean? We've used it, but we're not sure it's great. And so I always say 95%, and people are like, well, what about the rest? I'm like, well, there's stuff don't feel good about sharing quite yet.
Yeah, when I said your site was really organized and I guess methodical, that's partly what I meant. I looked at it and I had the feeling that if I were a middle school teacher, I could put something together from the website without even contacting you.
Yeah, it would certainly be possible.
And so but then I'm missing the 5% that we have to debate. But
well, the 5%'s not essential. You could do our stuff without the 5%, to be honest. It's experimental, is how I would say it. So.
Okay. Yeah, to me, again, that's why I was sort of impressed with how well it had been put together so that people could both see what it is and then actually use it if they wanted to.
Thanks. I have some really fantastic staff who've been working on that for a couple of years. And the base website, the earthforce.org, just went through a big rewrite. And we hired a new staff member who did it, and she's just phenomenal. So I'm excited when I get good feedback about it.
Yeah, you should. It is deserved. How do I want to say it? How do you expand? I mean, if somebody you're in 15 states now. Is there, does something have to happen to get into more states, or is it just waiting for somebody that wants to be involved?
Yeah, well, we have two basic models of how we expand. The first is through a partner or through partnerships that we have. So you probably noticed we do a program called the Rise Challenge. And the Rise Challenge looks specifically at natural hazards and community resilience. And it's a partnership with FEMA primarily and some other folks. And through that partnership, each year we're adding 3 locations where we're identifying a nonprofit partner, we're training and preparing them, and then they're essentially delivering, Earth Force programming in their community. And so that will be in all 10 FEMA regions within 5 years, and be in 17 sites. And so through that way, we're kind of replicating Earth Force in other communities, as it were. So that's one way that we grow. The second way that we grow is I mentioned that we're training and preparing some other nonprofits to do this kind of work. And the next stage of that development is we're creating what we're calling a community of practice. And a community of practice is where people come together with common goals and common needs and learn from one another and how to do it. And so our goal is to get 300 organizations that are actively delivering this idea of environmental action civics, and to create a community around them where we're learning from one another, where we've established standards for quality, we've established standards for practice, so on and so forth. And so we're really trying to propagate an idea. And I think you probably noticed on the top of our website, it says something like, we're transforming environmental education. And we're really taking this idea that civics should be embedded in any environmental education. And we're pushing it out into a much broader field, trying to create a new branch of environmental education, essentially. And we, so far, Dennis, knock on wood, response to both of those has been really outstanding, right? There is a hunger in this country for people to learn how to become civically engaged. There's a hunger in the environmental movement to get people, doing grassroots work. And there's a really big hunger to get those voices that we don't normally hear around environmental issues to be heard. And our process, our method, I think, is just an amazing way to do that. And so a lot of people want to adopt it.
I don't think anybody could have thought that kids could accomplish what these kids are actually doing.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? I mean, 13-year-olds who change state laws or get cities to be more fire resistant. It blows me away. And I do it every day. So yeah, it's about kids finding their voice and what they care about. Remember, when I was talking to you about the process, we spend a lot of time helping educators find ways to let kids identify what they care about, right? What's important to them, not me, right? Like I have my own choices of environmental issues, and the kids we work with, they walk out their front door, right? And look at what's happening to them. This is a good example. We had a group of young women in Chicago, the south side of Chicago this year. And they were worried about flooding in their community. Chicago, like a lot of parts of the country, and I'm sure Wisconsin too, you guys get about the same amount of rain, but you get it in a fewer days, right? So it rains a lot more all at once. And what was happening with these young women is when these rain events would happen, they would go out and the rainwater was going into the combined sewer overflow system, which essentially means raw sewage is flowing down their street, right? And so they were like, we don't want that, right? We don't want raw sewage flowing down our street. We want the system to, we want a better system where the water's not going into the sewer, where it's not overflowing, right? Where we're actually managing stormwater. And so they put together this knockout presentation. I mean, I was just blown away what they could do in 5 minutes on video to tell things. And they went to like the city alderman and their local district folks and everybody else, and just said, let's work together to do something about this. And so their first step was they got a bunch of people to remove their downspouts from their houses. They were putting them right into the sewer, right? And so the kids were like, let's stop doing that, right? That doesn't make any sense. And now they're still working with the aldermen, the city council and stuff to try and address the problems, the structural problems.
I like that.
I was adamant there, wasn't I? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The other thing I like about what both talking to you and on the site is I a lot of people, I think, not sure what the right word is, underestimate or don't take account of what kids are really capable of, what their interests are. We sort of dismiss them as kids. And I've always thought that we, even just in terms of what's taught, we're not going as far as we could. And you're jumping on another level and not talking about it, but you're showing what kids are really capable of, and both the energy they have, the interest, the intelligence, all of it. And I think that's just great.
And they enter it with no political agenda. Do you know what I mean? They're not fighting for some esoteric power statement or something. I was listening to the radio yesterday. I think it was C-SPAN, and there was a member of Congress who I think was from Wisconsin, Dennis. So this might jump out at you. But they were interviewing him, and they were saying, so you're in favor of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. You think everything in it is good. You want it. You think it'll be good for your district, so on and so forth. But you're going to vote against it. And he was like, yeah, I'm voting against it. And they were like, well, why? Why are you voting against it? And he was like, well, if I vote for it, I'm afraid that the Democrats might do something I'm opposed to later on. And and I'm just like, oh, it's not just the Republicans, right? But it's just such the mindset that you get once you get locked in that political battle, right? It might be good for my community, but if I let it happen, it lessens my power in some way. And kids don't enter with that mindset at all. They're like, there's poop running down the street. Let's do something about that.
Yeah, that's good. It could be from Wisconsin. We have sort of a long history of strange politicians and
strange choices.
We've done them all, and some really good ones. It's just a real mixture. But yeah, no, this is really enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this was great, and I would love, Dennis, shoot me an email or something directly, and let's stay in touch. I like to meet people and chat, and so unless you're opposed to that, but just I would love to keep you in the loop.
Very good. I'd like that. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your week. I was going to say weekend, but it's only Thursday. It's not Friday.
I know. We're getting there.
We're getting there. Yeah. All right. Take care.
You too. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.